And he just looked at me like, hey, this ain't never happened before. What's going on here?
That's what I picked up a two before, though.
That was the only time I ever hit him, but he threw knives at me. And although I did stab him one time, but it was...
No, seriously. I bet that's the reason why they thought we was going to end up in prison, because, I mean, things what are they going to do next? Anyway,
oh, my goodness. Remember, you're on video.
Yeah. We're just warming up right now.
Yeah, we're just warming
up. Blackmail has started on.
I know, right? Yeah.
Should we pause for a little bit?
Oh, man. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have a really, really special surprise for everybody. This is what I consider Brother Bob and Pastor Temple. And Brother Bob was my pastor as a young kid, and Pastor Temple's been my pastor for many years. And so this is a really special video for me, because both of them and both of you guys have had a huge impact in my life and the calling on my life and where I'm at today. And so start with Brother Bob. If you want to introduce yourself, because there's going to be a lot of people that watch this video that don't know who you are. And so if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll move to Pastor Temple, and y'all kind of talk about your relation and stuff like that. So,
okay. I'm Bob Temple. I was Pastor John's pastor. I think he was about 12 years old, wasn't he, when we came to Tacoma Park. Was his pastor for about 12 years, and then after I left there, he ended up here at Bethel, and then my brother became his pastor.
Yep.
For those, I know he just mentioned it, for those that don't know, Robert and I are brothers. I mean, you said Brother Bob and Pastor Temple. Whenever Robert and Donna started coming to church here after they had left their pastorate, everyone here called me Pastor Temple, but he said, they just call me Brother Bob. He said, I've been their pastor for years, and they call me Brother Bob, and they show greater respect to you. They call you pastor.
I prefer Brother Bob.
But anyway, just for the sake of those that may not know, Robert and I were brothers, and I am the youngest by 2 years.
Which is the prettiest is what I want to know.
Yeah, well,
I think you nailed it earlier when you said
we'll let the audience determine that, you know.
Oh, too bad that wasn't on video. I said earlier that Brother Bob was prettier, but I don't know. They got into a fist fight and got to wrestling around on the floor, so I took it back. Well, let's talk about this. Because a lot of people may not know where you guys come from and how you got started in ministry. So you guys talk to me about your childhood and what that looked like.
Well, poor. I mean, really, I thought about earlier this morning, if I had time, I could have dug some pictures out.
Yeah.
You might have wanted to post on this here of us out on the old farm, and it was pretty pitiful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of grew up in Kildare, Oklahoma. We both were born when we were in Kildare. I know I was. I don't know about you. You may have been adopted. But anyway, those were some of the best times in the world that I remember back when we were just kids. And we lived in, really, it was poverty we lived in. Now, we didn't know, because there's other people lived just like what we did.
Yeah.
But many of the pictures that we have, Mom and Dad would just go off and leave us there at the house, just the two of us. And, of course, we were very mischievous whenever they'd do that. But we have pictures that we're sitting outside on the porch in our underwear, just our shorts only, you know. And our feet are dirty, because that's the way we lived every day out there in the country. We called it the old farm.
We didn't have any running water. It was
really
our bathroom
water was about 100 yards away.
Yeah. So was the bathroom
with a bucket. Yeah.
So winters were pretty rough.
The what?
Winters were pretty rough.
We didn't realize it, because we had about 10 blankets on us that night.
But we
really did. We had all kinds of quilts on us.
Yeah, Robert and I, we had the same bedroom, and we woke up one morning when it was a blowing snow, And I we looked over there, and the snow had blown into the crack of the wall, and it was probably 2 feet deep. You know, we didn't think anything about it. It's just the way we grew up.
Yeah.
As in the winter, summer, we slept outside.
Is that right?
We were still poor at that point.
Is that right? So how old were y'all when y'all moved to Choctaw?
Let's see, I would have been 11.
I was 13.
Yeah, I would have been 11. He
Is
was
that right?
13.
I just turned 13.
Yeah.
Started in the 8th grade.
And then you guys grew up in Choctaw
Yeah.
from there on out,
we've
correct?
been, we never thought about having, being poor, you know, but I guess we didn't even know it.
Yeah,
You know, it was, but those were great memories. I think back as we were kids and everything. Of course, our relatives, you know, you've heard us talk about them, but they never believed that we would ever be pastors.
Right.
I bet.
Well, let's talk about that then, because my mom made a comment here a few weeks back. She said, "John, you know, I really thought that growing up that pastors were perfect.
Yeah,
That they started off perfect. They never sinned. They never done any of that stuff. So you guys were perfect little angels, is what I hear, right?
Sure we were.
Sure was.
Yeah, it was quite an experience. I mean, I got in church probably before you did, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Few months.
Yeah, a few months. But we were saved in a revival that was there at First Assembly God Church there right downtown Choctaw, you know.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know how many weeks it was, like 16 weeks or something like that. But I got saved first, and then after that, it was just a few days later, Robert got saved and
Is that
born
right?
again.
So what was your life before salvation? Y'all were little angels, or?
I was.
We probably ought to just move on to the next question.
Oh, listen, our Robert and I, we fought from kids. I was a middle child. I guess you could consider him to be one too. We were both in the middle. Our youngest sister and then our oldest sister, we were in the middle, in between them. But we fought all the time. That's the reason why they thought we'd probably be in prison.
Yeah.
That's what our relatives said, that we'd be in prison. But anyway, they were good times. So we enjoyed life and whatever. But after we got saved and born again, a lot of things changed drastically in our life. And I'm not saying that I was more perfect than Robert, but I didn't run with the guys that he ran with, whatever. And but after he got saved, Robert completely changed. And
Well, on an individual level, what was your life like before salvation, as far as spiritually or lack of?
Well, I'm telling I moved to Choctaw as a good kid.
Yeah.
Well, really, but I was getting into the turn 13, and then, I mean, you know, how mothers will say sometimes, well, my son, he just got with the wrong crowd.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the guys I ran with, their mothers said the same thing to me. So it all depends on which mother you start with, the wrong crowd. But I had about 3 years. I was pretty wild.
Is that right?
But things turned around
Yeah.
my senior year of high school.
well, he's told me stories I never even knew that ever happened.
Well, there's stories I'd never tell my parents.
Yeah, but I mean, they could have been death experiences with some of the people he was running with and whatever. But
Well, some of the guys I ran around with back then, the first 10 years we was out of school, they spent a good part of that either in McAllister or at
Really?
El Reno Federal Prison. So, but there was always something that kept me from going as far as they did
Really?
it. I mean, I've been with them a time when they was going to do things that I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I've hitchhiked home from
Really?
Midwest City before because of what they was getting ready to go do. And or I could have ended up in a lot more trouble than what I did. But all that turned around when I met Jesus. So,
Yeah.
and we grew up really knowing about Jesus, but we didn't know him. I mean, there was times growing up when we lived out there on the farm that, see, my mother's dad was a Pentecostal preacher, but they never lived around here. As we was growing up, they lived in New Mexico. But So then there would be times Mom would say, well, I'm going to take you all to church. And we might go to church for a time or two, and then that would be it, maybe for a year or two, you know. And so, I mean, we had an awareness. I mean, we knew there was a God.
Yeah.
And we knew about Jesus, but we had never accepted him. And it wasn't until my senior year, just starting my senior year in the same revival, he was saying, well, the revival was already over. And my wife, who's now been my wife for over 62 years, well, we dated then, was going together, and she went to church with my mother and them one night, and I stayed home. I wouldn't go. And she come home there, and I was back in our bunk beds where we had back. Our bedroom was the garage. Actually, it was a single car garage, and I was just laying in there on my bed, probably pouting as I think back, because she went to church with them, still standing there with me. She comes in there and she says, I got to tell you something. I got saved tonight. And I'm laying there thinking, well, whoop-de-doo, what's this going to mean now for us? But it wasn't just a short time after that I went. And the revival's already over. The evangelist had
remember
left.
that part of it, yeah.
He's already, and I think it was just a Wednesday night service, and I went just to please her and to please my mother and things, and it was a pretty fiery service.
Yeah.
You knew hell was real by the time the preacher got through. Done had me feeling it.
They preached a lot more on hell back then than people do today.
And it probably may need to be preached on more than it is today, too, because there is a hell. Jesus talked about it quite a bit. But anyhow, and come time of the altar call, I was on the very back row. That was as close as they was going to get me to the front. And then service on, people was just everywhere praying, others getting saved, and different things going on. The pastor come back to me and tried to get me to give my heart, Lord. I just stood there just shaking my head, and I ain't going to do it. And 2 or 3 more come by. I said, back then they come, this may be your last warning. And it may, you don't never know, because it could be.
For you, it could have been.
But I tell you, the thing that really just broke me that night was and I think he was about your age, Jerry Billings.
Yeah,
he was
Jerry,
about 15, wasn't he?
He's a year younger.
A year younger, 14 than he was. And he'd got saved, I think, in that same revival early on. And boy, he just come to me broken-hearted and tears just running down his face, just saying, why won't you give your heart to the Lord? And when I just seen the tears and the compassion come from me, and it just broke me, man. And I fell down on the floor right there and repented, got saved. And I was laid on that floor for about an hour probably before I got up. But when I got up, I knew I was a changed person. I mean, everything, all the perspectives I had in life changed right then in just about every way. And after the service that night, well, Margaret, Dick's wife's brother, Landis, me and Don and he and the girl he was dating, well, she had gotten saved that night also. It seemed like there was another couple. And after the service that night, the only place we usually would go to eat out would be Sussie's Pizza in Oklahoma City. And so we left to go up to Sussie's, and man, they're all talking about, boy, this is just so exciting. It feels so good to be saved. And I'm sitting, this whole thing's just weighing on me. I wasn't feeling all the excitement they was, but what I was feeling was more, man, there's some changes got to be made now. And I'm thinking about all these changes in the people I run with and just different things. I've got to make some changes in my life. And it began then. The very next day I experienced a big change.
Is that right?
The day before I was working for a carpenter, did all the building, we did everything, the electrical, the plumbing. And so I was out there digging foundations. When it come to that, the little old man, he's going to be out there digging it. And I was out there digging that foundation, and I slipped with that shovel. Man, I just rattled off a string of cuss words just like I did the day before.
Yeah.
But the day before, it didn't bother me when I did it. But after getting saved that night before, man, when I done that, I felt terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't ever want to do that again. And I was glad I knew enough to pray and ask God to forgive me and went on from then. And I'll tell you, God just did he did a work in my life. There's things I never done again after getting
Really?
saved.
Yeah.
I mean, he changed my vocabulary just about overnight.
How about that?
I mean, it was just that drastic of spiritual surgery
Yeah.
he did on me. And all the other things fell off too, the drinking, the smoking, the running around.
Yeah.
I quit all of it immediately. I mean, that was a decision. I said, I knew from the time I met Jesus that night, there had to be some changes.
Yeah.
It wasn't difficult at all to drop all that stuff off.
Yeah.
I mean, it just fell off. And I was able to walk in that liberty that Jesus had for me. Now, there's other areas of my life that I still
Struggle
work
with a
on
little
till today, sometimes with my stinking attitude and different things. There's some things we have to overcome daily, I
Yeah.
think.
Authentic encounter with an authentic God is what
That's
is.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, everything he said is all true, but there's two things that God didn't save him from.
Picking on him, probably.
Yeah. Number one was beating me up, and he did that until I became what?
Well,
I
we
became-
was both, after we both got saved, we had the worst fight we ever had.
Oh, I
Really?
know. Oh,
And
yeah.
we was living right here on Clark Street, and we started outside, and I was playing catch with the ball or something. Donna was there; she can tell you, remembers more about that. I just remember we got in a fight, and I mean, it was a literal fight with him. I mean, he was swinging at me, he'd grab anything he could get on, try to hit me, and I just ward him off because I was always bigger than him.
Yeah.
By the time he got to be a sophomore and I was a senior, he was getting bigger. And that day I thought, man, this is going too far. And I hauled off and hit him as hard as I could, right upside of the head. And we'd already fought into our room in the house, and there was deep freeze in it. And he just went back across that deep freeze, and he just looked at me like, hey, this ain't never happened before. What's going on here?
That's what I picked up a two before, though.
That was the only time I ever hit him, but he threw knives at me. And although I did stab him one time, but it was,
No, seriously. I mean, that's the reason why they
did.
thought we was going to end up in prison, because, I mean, these weren't little bitty fights like kids shoving
Yeah.
each other. I mean, we from the front door to the back door, we were fighting, hitting each other. And if I got outside, could find a shovel or whatever, I was going to kill him with it. As a matter of fact, there was one day he took off running. That's when we had a watermelon, and he said, "Let me cut the watermelon, and we'll share the heart." So he cut the heart out and grabbed it and took off running. I grabbed that butcher knife and threw it, and it stuck right in the side of the house as he went around.
Goodness sakes.
A lot of people, they don't know all this about Robert and I, but since we're sharing it. But that one thing was he still picked on me a lot until I got bigger. And the second thing was,
well, we grew up a lot after we got saved.
well, yeah, we did.
That one right after we got
But
saved.
even
was
after
the
we
last
got
one.
saved, though, this kept on going on. We were in the garage. They'd turned it into a bedroom.
Yeah.
And I kept my side, his bed was on one side, mine on the other. I kept it immaculate. The bed was made every day, real nice. You could flip the quarter on it, you know. And I washed and dried all my own clothes and folded them and put them in my dresser drawer and whatever.
Yeah.
Robert's got a stack of clothes over on his side. And then I'd go to the drawer and open it up. I noticed he was wearing my socks, my underwear, and everything. And so that continued until him and Donna got married and did all of that. But
Well, my bed got made, but it's usually our
No,
older sister.
here-
She's my older sister come in and made it.
and then if I'd come home from school and some of his buddies or one or two of them would come, and they'd be laying on my bed all messed up and everything.
Yeah.
And there were things like that we kind of fought over or whatever. But it's kind of funny now, but it wasn't back then with me. But my salvation experience was quite a bit different. Most of the kids I ran around with, they were in church and whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, there's one young man that he was the one that got me in church. It's not in church today, but he got me in church. We were, at that time, I was going to the First Baptist here in Choctaw, and they had what they called RAs, which was a group for the young people and whatever. And we'd go camping and things of that nature. So he's one that got me in church. But then, when I actually got saved, it would have, in the 6th and 7th grade, I met Margaret in the 6th grade.
Wow.
And she's a little old bitty thing, she still is. But anyway, in the 7th grade, she had invited me to come to the Assembly of God Church where she was attending. And so then every Sunday I was just going. But I wasn't going because of Jesus. I was going because Margaret was there.
Yeah.
And our relationship grew and whatever. And then finally we dated through high school and then got married at my 3rd year of college. But anyway, my salvation experience was a little bit different. I was there in the revival. It was a very powerful revival, and he had different speakers that came in, and some of them were just, they weren't famous evangelists or whatever, but boy, the power of God was just so strong. And I remember it was 3 nights in a row, I stood back there during the altar call, and I looked down at my knuckles, and they were white because I was holding on to the back of the pew so strong because the power of God was just working to where I knew I needed to go down and repent. But it was on the 3rd night that before there's any preaching or whatever, I just stepped out and went down and got between the first 2 pews and gave my heart and life to the Lord. And then from there it was just a growing process thereafter. And I don't know, Robert and I both, we cussed a lot. I didn't know he cussed as much as me, but most of my cussing was against him. I
get blamed for everything.
But we grew up in Kildare. We grew up next to our neighbors, which was about a mile off. But they knew all these cuss words, and I picked them up. I didn't even know what I was saying. I was just a little kid.
Yeah.
And then Mom would, if she caught me saying them, well then, back then, there wasn't a DHS because if there had been, I'd called on her.
Yeah.
Because she'd hold me down and take soap and wash my mouth out with soap. That ever happened to you?
Oh, I've had,
Yeah, you couldn't do that now as a parent and get by with it. But anyway, I realized after I got saved that would be the one thing that God would have to deliver me from, and which He did. But I remember when we started football practice prior to school starting, I went out for a pass and I dropped it, and I said the D word, and because I was witnessing to all the football players and telling them, man, you guys got to come to church, you got to get saved and all this. Yeah. And then they heard me say that word, and I came back to the huddle, but I repented on the way back, and I got back to the huddle, and they said, we thought you got saved. And I said, well, I did, but I said, I've already repented of it, and I'm asking you guys to forgive me too, but... Whenever you look back on your life, you can see what God has done and orchestrated and whatever. And, after graduating from Oklahoma State with a degree in architecture and then going to work for an architect, then left him, went to work for a home designer. But in this whole process, I knew God had more for me than just what I was doing, but I came to the conclusion it was because I needed to start my own business, which I did. It was very successful, doing extremely well. But I kept getting closer to God. And at that time, I was going to church at it was Union Grove, but became Life Christian. And Dwight Burchett was my pastor, and I kept growing. But I had my own business at that time. But if I'd never started my own business, I probably would have never left architecture because I loved it, so much. But anyway, the opportunities just kept growing, and I kept growing under the ministry of Brother Dwight. And then I knew that God had something more for me, and then that's when things began to open up here in Choctaw. The Assembly of God Church that used to be here, they moved it to Nakoma Park.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people at that time, they were city oriented from the standpoint they didn't want to drive to another city to go to church or whatever. They wanted to go in their own. So they had asked me if I would do some home groups and whatever. Yeah. And so I had a home group, and it just kept growing till we had probably about 15 people, which there wasn't any houses that were really big enough that could do that. And so they said, well, we'd like to start a church here, but they didn't have me in mind as far as doing being the pastor.
Yeah.
They had an older gentleman that was in that they kind of had talked with, but I kept doing the home groups, and then they said, well, why don't we have a regular church service? And I knew the pastor at Brother Thompson at that time at First Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Me and him were real good friends, and the old Baptist church, which is an apostolic church now, it had been available for a long time. They couldn't sell it, but I talked with him and asked him if we could just rent it.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. He said that'd be great. So we went and cleaned it all up, and we had our first service there, and it would hold about probably 150 people, but the first service we filled the first pew, and maybe the first and second pew we filled, and I was in the study, and a place they'd made for me to prior to service, and I was in there and I was looking out the window, and the Lord spoke to my heart and said, "You're going to pastor this church." And I hadn't asked him if I could pastor or whatever, but I didn't say anything to anyone. And then they found out that this pastor that they thought they could get, he wasn't going to be available, and so they came to me and asked me if I would be the pastor. And I told them, well, I need to talk with Margaret about it, because I hadn't shared anything, but I knew what God had spoken to my heart. And so I went home and told Margaret, and she said, well, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And so I went back and told them, that we would do it. And so in February of 1972, we became a charter church. It was during that time that we filed for a 501c3 and whatever, tax exempt and whatever. But we had 19 charter members, and I think we only have, besides Margaret and I think we only have 3 that are still alive.
Wow.
2 or 3 of them that are still alive. And so from that, it grew. The ministry grew. But if I can just back up, I don't want to take all the time, and you can edit out what you want. But when I was just a kid, and we were poor, I would sit down. We ordered everything out of Sears and Roebuck catalog. Yeah. You remember those?
Oh, I sure do.
And
we used it more ways than one.
We went to the outhouse out there. We used them out there too, because we couldn't afford toilet paper. The little bitty soft pages were the best. They used those quicker than the slick ones, but nonetheless, I've always been just a dreamer, about things. Anything I did, even with my business, I knew that it could be bigger than what I thought it could. But anyway, I'd look at that Sears and Roebuck catalog, and I would circle things that someday I would want. It could be mostly clothes and things like that. But that was kind of a beginning. Whenever it came to starting a church and whatever, I knew that there was more out there than what I could even imagine. And but being an architect, you got to be a visionary anyway, because someone comes in and says, I want this many bedrooms and this and that, and I want it. And so you got to see it before you can put it on paper. And so that's kind of the way it was with the church here. Of course, you look at everything we've got here, and it's been God. It hasn't been me. I just wanted to be an obedient servant. But it's been a great journey. It really has. And stepping down as pastor and then seeing you as pastor, I relate I relate well to you, because our styles are, you may not like that our styles are close, but the thing that I see in you, though, Pastor John, is that you are a visionary. You can't build a church without a vision, and without a vision, we perish. And so, that's, I just love what I'm doing, and a lot of people say, well, why don't you just retire and just take it easy and whatever. But if I wasn't here, I still couldn't do it.
Right, yeah.
I had a pastor here, he's already passed on, but whenever he stopped down from being a pastor, he started losing his memory of Scripture and the calling and whatever. And I never wanted that to happen to me.
Well, let's kind of talk about the ups and downs of ministry. So when I first met Brother Bob, like you said, I was probably 12 years old, something like that. And as I was listening to y'all's story about growing up as a kid and how your salvation come to be, I began to picture that God is such an intimate God that He even had me in mind when He was saving you. That oftentimes that person receiving that blessing is not the end user of that blessing. You know what I mean? It continues to flow. And so I was telling them that after I had girls and after I turned 40, God began to open up my tear ducts. And so just listening to that, I was kind of having a hard time holding myself together, because I see, the things that you guys went through, and even those before you guys that you went through, that if you wouldn't have went through them and if you wouldn't have accepted Christ, where would I be in my life today, and how much different my life might look. And so Brother Bob became my pastor at the age of 12, I think it was. And I did some stupid stuff, man. I mean, right? Man, I did some ignorant stuff growing up as a kid. And Brother Bob got to be there for much of it. In the middle of the night, cops calling and my mom calling, wanting them to pray because they thought I was dead. And I was just out doing stupid stuff, And so Brother Bob had actually, you guys had first come to the church, and Brother Bob was always a jokester. So he shows up to the door and rattling the door, right? It was after church or something one night. You guys were coming over to eat. And my sister was scared, and so I run and grabbed the shotgun, and I was going to shoot through the door, and thank God I didn't. Stephanie had already called the cops, and it was a whole ordeal. But you remember that?
I ought to. I'm reminded of it real often.
But growing up in church, I can remember things that I did, in church, and man, I was just, if I've had those, you guys talk about people saying that they thought you were going to end up in prison, whatever. And I was telling them before the video started that I have people I come into contact with all the time that are shocked that I'm a pastor. Yeah. But let's talk about, so you guys obviously both become pastors, both had a call on your life. Where did yours start? And maybe I want to kind of get off into the ministry aspect of it, kind of what that was like for both of you. I know there's challenges that come along with being a pastor. And so what are some of the challenges that you experienced and maybe even discouragements as a pastor? And then we'll lead into, like yesterday at the when we had visited the nursing home, she's talking about all these moments in her life that you guys were a part, or you were a part of it. Mm-hmm. And something that has stood out to me is each one of these videos I've done, with the exception of one of them, each one of them you guys were a huge part, both of you. And if you go back and listen to the videos, both of you were this kind of like this cornerstone in their life, and you guys helped them get through some really, really tough times. And so
I think probably some of the ups and downs I had I brought on myself. Dick's always been the more outgoing and confident, and I've always been happy just being in the background, Yeah. And then God called me to preach, and I had to overcome, and still have to. For me to get up in front of people now, I mean, I have to purpose to do it. Yeah. I mean, it's just a part of my personality or whatever. Is not one to be up in front of people, be in charge or anything like that. And just but knowing God's called you to, and I've asked myself that many times, why did God even call me? Because the way I always feel, I'd rather just be in the background. Yeah. I'd rather be doing something else, somebody else telling me and directing me than being up there and trying to direct things or different things. And so, but it's just come to that place that we just rest in Him and rest in His calling that He's put on our lives. And I still struggle with that today, to rest in that calling, because it's not something and you preached on a while back, and I have too, about we just want to do what's comfortable to us. And really follow God and do what we need to be doing. We're going to have to do some things that's not comfortable, because He wants to grow us out of that, grow us beyond it. And even though you may still have those feelings and tendencies, to want to be in that comfort zone, still you're going to obey God and trust Him and step out in faith. And I mean, if I'd have done what was in my comfort zone, I would have agreed to come here today. Just forget about this. But you'd mentioned something. I don't remember if you and I was talking one day, and I can't remember exactly what you're saying, but it reminded me of the Monday mornings after preaching on Sundays was usually a bad day for me. Because I start rehearsing everything that went on, what I said I shouldn't have said, and what I didn't say I should have said, and how I said it, and all these things. And when you're up there, you're just trying to obey God, and you're doing what God's putting you to do, and we shouldn't be second guessing and questioning God, what He's put in our heart and to share. But still, yet we still have those tendencies of the flesh to sometimes to say things, maybe it come across in the wrong way. And I'd get home and I'd ask Donna, I said, how'd that sound when I said that? She said it sounded fine. But to me, I'm thinking, man, everybody's going to be stoning me the next day, So I mean, it's just a lot of times it's the battles in our own thoughts concerning ministry, and those things have happened even. From the time I got saved, it seemed like evangelism was something that was always important to me. I began when I went to college. I'd always talk to them about the Lord. They all knew where I was at and where I stood. And then when I quit college, because I wanted to come home and get married, so the night after the last football game, I hitchhiked home and didn't go back and got married, and then went to work in construction. And always carried the Bible in my lunch bucket for opportunities I might have then to try and just talk to somebody, about the Lord, and taking all the Bible courses I could take in 2 nights, and did that for 1 semester, and then, God just really put it on my heart. It's time to move on, and so I talked to my supervisor, and he understood it all. He was happy for me. Because I told him I was going to move to Texas and enroll full-time at the Southwestern Assemblies of God Bible College. So that's what we did, moved down there, and then it was just, kind of a progressive thing where didn't know if I was going to be pastoring or what I was going to be doing at that time. But after the first semester I was there, I didn't want to go to summer school. I wanted to be involved in some type of ministry that involved evangelism, just being able to witness to people, talk to people about the Lord, and just out of the blue to us anyhow. God works in the background when we don't know what's going on. Went and got the mail one day and had a letter in the mail from a home missionary in Arizona on the Apache Indian reservation there. Said they was going to be gone for the summer itinerant, and they was from, I believe it was Indiana, was going to be back home for the summer and visiting all the different churches that support them. Want to know if I'd come out there and take care of the church. Man, and that's what we'd been praying about, going to the Indian. That's what we wanted to do. Out here, we hadn't even talked to anybody about it. And then, but through a mutual friend, they heard about us and sent me a letter. So we got back to them and said, yeah, we'll be there. Went and spent that summer out there taking care of the church for him. And I think about it now, I had to preach 4 times a week, and I hadn't preached but 4 or 5 times when I went out there. We had Sunday morning, Sunday night, Tuesday night, and Thursday night services. And you talk about a challenge, and God really proved Himself to us in so many ways out there about trusting Him. Because we didn't have any support, nobody backing us or anything. We had a little bit of money that we'd saved from selling our property, our house, and when we moved from Drummerite to Texas, and we had a little bit of it, but we didn't ask for nobody for no money. We just went out there, And when we got ready to leave, though, well, the church we was attending there, they found out about it, and they said, well, we want to help you. So they gave us, I think it was like $300. And back in 1974,
Yeah.
$300 go quite
Oh,
a
yeah.
ways. We got out there, but on the Indian reservation where we had to trade, get groceries and gasoline there on the reservation, gasoline was 20, 30 cents a gallon higher than any place else.
Oh, yeah.
Milk was twice as high as any. I mean, the groceries
Really?
was just about
Yeah.
twice as high. We'd gone to the trading post one day there and got groceries, and on our way back, me and Donna was talking, said, man, well, we're going to have to cut back. Well, as a matter of fact, it was on our way up where we was talking about cutting back. Because when we got there, our boys was just little then. I mean, they were, I don't remember, kindergarten and
Yeah.
second grade, first grade, something along in that area there. And they want, Daddy, can we have some Cracker Jack? No, you can't have Cracker Jack. We just
Yeah.
can't do it now. Can we have some donuts? No, we can't have any donuts.
Yeah.
You know, we just buying the bare staples
Right,
we
yeah.
needed, and which we didn't mind doing it. I mean, it was worth it to us just to be out there.
Yeah.
But God just proved Himself to us. We got back from getting those groceries. Donna was in putting them up in the cabinet. We were staying in the missionaries' mobile home they lived in there. She was putting the groceries up, and all of a sudden a pickup with a camper on the back pulled up out there in the driveway, and it was a lady. She attended the church. She was the only white lady in the whole church. All the rest of
Yeah.
them was Apaches, and some of them was Hopi Indians. And she pulled up there, and she didn't like it because the missionaries there, they had a dog, and she didn't like get around that dog. And so I walked out there, and she said, I got some stuff for you. She opened the back of that camper, and I'm not exaggerating, the bottom, that entire bed of that camper was stacked with groceries, sacks of groceries.
How about that?
And she said, Lord just laid it on my heart to bring you this stuff. And you know what was in some of them groceries? Cracker Jacks, donuts, steak, even had steak stuff we wouldn't even think about buying. And you know, we couldn't be, we just, it humbled us too
Yeah.
to just know God cared that much about even those types of things.
Yeah.
But through the years, through the ministry, I mean, there's a lot of challenges in a lot of different ways because you face situations, and I'll have to sit there and be totally honest. I didn't handle a whole lot of situations like I should have,
Yeah.
and if I could go back right now, I'd do it differently. That's the reason I don't know if you remember I told you one day, if you come up against something you're not sure how to handle it, think back to how Brother Bob handled it and do just the opposite, and you'll probably come out okay. But I mean, and there's going to be continual challenges, whatever. I mean, anytime you're stepping out to do something for God, you're going to face challenges.
yeah.
Because we've got an enemy out there that's going to challenge us on everything.
That's right.
I mean, anything we're going to try to do right for His glory, we're going to meet challenges with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes some of the challenges I met was because of my own doing, that I didn't handle a situation maybe as godly as I should have, as proper.
It's funny. I found that pastors are human too.
Yeah, very human.
Yeah, we're really human. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you something, Pastor Temple. So we all have struggles through lives and through ministry and growing churches and stuff like that. So remind me how many years you were active as pastor?
47.
47.
Yeah.
So after you stepped down, there's people that you still come into contact with and stuff like that, but getting through all the struggles, there's no doubt you had struggles in ministry. What are some of the things that you look back on now? Would you say, I would absolutely go back and go through everything all over again because of this, or man, I might have stayed an architect?
Yeah. No, I mean, here's the thing. The process of going through what you're going through is a growing process, and you learn so much from it.
Yeah.
If I'd never gone through the things I went through, I probably wouldn't have been as wise with finances, dealing with people, even problem people at times and whatever.
Yeah.
But I always looked at it as a learning process. And there were things that I did do, not so much financially, but with just dealing with people that I learned from it and learned how to do it different, to where if they left, they knew that you still loved
Yeah,
them. And
yeah.
you and I was talking about that yesterday. But it's heartbreaking though whenever you have people that you love and then they leave the church, and it may be for their own reason, but that sometimes you don't even totally understand why they would do it. But I've kept that door open, and you know that.
Yeah.
I've always kept the door open, just kept loving them and whatever. A lot of them come back.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But probably the two biggest things that in pastoring that, and I learned from other pastors too how to deal with these things. But probably the two biggest things were how to manage finances and also how to deal properly with people. You know, and those were probably the most difficult things. You know.
Yeah.
But I bet I totally learned from it. I guess it was the early '80s whenever we had the oil business just went completely sour and everything, and everything was happening here in Oklahoma. And a lot of people were moving from the church. I met to another city and whatever. Just our budget overnight. We had a budget at that time, but overnight it was cut in half with people that left, and that I wanted to quit.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I wanted to die.
Wow.
I mean, from the standpoint, because I felt like I finally came to a place that I said, "Listen, God, this isn't my church." I still remember this, the time that it happened. I said, "This isn't my church; it's your church." And I know I've got to be responsible for the finances and how to do it right and whatever, but I'm going to need your wisdom on this. But the Lord just shared with me that if you're going to give it to me, then you give it to me.
Yeah.
And you don't have to take it to the people. What you take to the people is the fact of what I am doing and you being blessed and me. And there were several months there that this transition was taking place, and we were coming up. When I say several months, it was probably a year, but where we would come up as much as $10,000 for a month, less than what we needed, and then God would always remind me, "You said you gave it to me, so what I want you to do is pray and allow me to speak to the hearts of the people, and it'll be taken care of." And I remember, well, there's more than 3 times, but I remember 3 times that I said, "Heavenly Father, we're going to be 10,000 short, and I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm giving it totally to you." And I remember one of the occasions, we met every Sunday morning early just for prayer. It was some of our leaders and whatever. We'd join hands and pray. And after we'd prayed, I had a person come up to me and say, "Listen, God spoke to my heart. I don't know where we're at financially, but here's a $10,000 check."
Wow.
And that happened 3 or 4 times. And so we made it through that, but finances are still a major thing in the church, and people don't understand that, that they think, you got plenty of money and whatever, but I kept feeding into the people how God was blessing us and how God would bless them through their giving. And at one time, I don't know, we'd have to look, but over 90% of the people that were attending were paying tithes and offerings. And when you have that, you know that you can that you can make budget. But then the second thing was just, sometimes people they become unhappy, and early on I didn't know how to handle that. I thought, well, did I do something wrong, or am I not a good pastor or whatever? But God really got a hold of me on that and said, all I want you to do is keep loving them.
Yeah.
And that's whenever I started that saying, we're going to love each other even if it kills us. And everyone still repeats that. If I said we're going to love each other even, and you'll hear the audience say, even if it kills us. And that's when love just really began to grow and whatever. And even in that love, though, there were people that left and came back. And I remember, but to be honest with you, those would be the 2 biggest things that I feel like I faced. Leadership has always been good here. You've been here for how long?
Well, it's 18, 20 years.
Yeah, 18. Yeah, Plus, you were in our school too, and we won't even talk about
it. Shut down the first year I showed up there. If that tells you.
Because I couldn't handle you. That's the reason why I couldn't handle you, John.
Oh my goodness.
But anyway, those were really were the two biggest things.
Yeah.
And
well, y'all both done an amazing job. There's so many things in my life that I can look back on that you guys have touched. So, what about you guys share just a few memories or a couple memories looking back on ministry and everything that you went through? Would you do it over again if you had to go back to the beginning?
Yeah, I would do it again.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say there's been times that I've had them thoughts maybe I should have stayed at OGD. But I mean, when you go through it and you look back at how things have come along, and you couldn't have never been. I mean, there's even though I love my job, I knew I could never be happy staying there. I mean, for me to look back and wish I'd never done it, it'd be a very selfish attitude. I mean, self-centered attitude to think that. So
there are a few stories or a few moments that God's given me throughout my short time in ministry, and I pray there's many, many more of them to come, that I go back to and say, if I wouldn't have, where would this person be? Or, because of that one story, I'm going to bear through what I'm going through now in hopes that God's going to continue those things. Is there something in your life that you can look back on and that you've used kind of as your cornerstone where you always go back to it and say, you know what, God did this through me in this person's life, and so it helped you get through moments in your ministry?
Now, I can probably think of several, though, and all of them had to do with somebody coming to Christ and getting delivered and healed and things. Even while we was out there on the Indian reservation, had a guy come to service, and he answered the altar call, prayed, got saved, received Jesus. And a few days after that, I went out to find him, because out there on the reservation, it wasn't addresses like we got now. You had to find different camps and things. I went out there and found where he lived, and his name was Curtis Burton. He was standing out there just smiling real big, And I'd found out after he got saved that he had been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver and was actually supposed to die. And I went out there and I started talking to Curtis, and he was still excited about Jesus coming into his life. And I said, well, I heard that you been diagnosed with cirrhosis. He said, yeah, but I'm already healed. And I mean, think about what would ever happen to Curtis if if it hadn't turned out the way it did me going out there. And another individual, and this was out there too, his sister attended our church there, and she said her brother had just been sent home with cirrhosis of the liver to die. They couldn't do him. I mean, that was really a rampant disease out there because of the alcoholism. And she told me how to find his place, a little old cabin off out in the country there. And I found him when he seen me coming. A lot of time Indians are kind of bashful people, and they're, he kind of tried to hide from me to start with, but I found him on the back porch. And I come around there, and I told him he wanted to come out there and his sister out there. But as I'm driving out there, I'm praying, and God gave me the scriptures to share with him as I'm driving out there. And when I got to talking to him, I mean, he was just standing there just real quiet, and I was standing there and just started sharing. I said, God's given me some scriptures to share with you. And I started sharing them with him, and tears just began to run down his face. And he gave his heart to the Lord right there on that back porch. I mean, it's just a lot of different examples like that. I could spend quite a bit of time just going through different ones and wondering, what if I hadn't obeyed God and been right there at that moment of time to do what he wanted me to do? I mean, what could have happened to them?
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I'm a walking testament of that. So, I mean, for real.
Well, number one, I would do it all over again, but I'd do it better.
Well, I'd do it a lot differently. That's for sure.
I would do it a whole lot better. But the second question that you asked and whatever, I mean, what Robert's talking about, it's been precious to me too, to see people that people have given up on and whatever. But the thing that I remember the most, I mean, I think ministry from a church has got to expand to the place it gets beyond the doors here and whatever. And almost every time that that I had someone that started getting involved in church or whatever, it normally ended up that they would end up in ministry. And you remember Tim Boyette, don't you? Well, Tim Boyette was my youth pastor, you know. And it wasn't long until, and he's pastored for years, and he still ministers and whatever. And then from Texas, Terry Cross, you know, very same thing, youth pastor. Yeah. He was here for years, but then he grew to a place that he said, it's time for me to go, and which I knew that. Yeah. It was easy to release him. Don Howard was the same way, and his name was Williams. I forget his...
Dale.
Yeah, Dale Williams. The same thing. I met him in youth camp, gave his heart and life to the Lord, got married, him and his wife, and they wanted to get involved in the church, and they would drive, I met quite a distance on the other side of Oklahoma City to come over, and he worked with the youth and whatever, and then he felt called, and he's still in ministry today.
How about that?
I think about how this thing is extended beyond just the walls, you know, here. And now it's in Texas, it's in Oklahoma, it's in Arkansas, it's everywhere, you know.
That's right.
So that has been a real important thing to me, and I know it is with you too, because what you want to happen here has got to be more than just what is happening here and stays here. It's got to get beyond these walls, you know. But anyway, those are. And then we've had a lot of salvations and whatever. If I had everyone in the church, if they were still alive, still alive, and still live here in Oklahoma, we'd probably have over 2,000 people that has filtered through, you know, through Bethel to, you know, to more ministry or wherever they go. They're working in a church or whatever. And that blesses me more than just about anything. It really does.
Well, for me. And you see that. So I was in, you guys know that I went to that tent revival last week, and which was, man, it was one of the highlights of my life, to be honest with you. But, you know, Stephen is there. You know, Stephen has been impacted by Bethel and our families, and so now he's doing a great work in Texas, and so that's an extension of this church, and we've got others in Texas doing the same thing, and it's extremely important. But as I'm listening to you guys talk, I'm trying to reflect on my life and the impact that you've had on me, and I go back to try to remember. I'm questioning myself. Do I remember even a sermon that they preached? Right, and so the reason I do that is to reflect on myself and what I can offer other people, you know, that I'm ministering to. And if I had to be honest and real, I don't know that I could sit down and say, he preached this message, or this message and this topic really spoke to me. But what I can say is you guys were always there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I preached a message here a while back about, and I got this off of some other pastor. He said that 80% of your ministry is being present and being faithful. Yeah. And whenever I look back as a kid, I can remember that faithfulness and that you guys being there. And as a kid, it was, you know, probably more Brother Bob because I was, you know, he was my pastor as a kid. But just going out in the parking lot and wrestling and stuff like that, and just those things really, really impacted my life to the point where it took me years to accept Christ. You know what I mean? It wasn't until Easter morning, after I'd already left the church and I'd gotten with Jessica, and she had a scenario where Kim had invited her to church because me and her were in such a bad spot in our life. Yeah. And she had gotten saved under Brother Bob's ministry. I don't know exactly. I wasn't there that day. And similar scenario, she comes home and she's excited and wants to tell me about it, and I'm like, great, you know. And then it started. You need to come to church, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. And I'm like, I don't want to go to church. I've heard Brother Bob preach.
You just didn't do what he preaches.
I know, right? Yeah, I listened to a lot of it. I just didn't apply it. But then after on that Easter Sunday, I showed up to church, and man, my life has never been the same. And I can honestly say that although I can't remember sermons, I definitely remember the impact. So, and so hopefully, moving forward, I'll have that, that impact. It's not so much about the words that we speak, but it's about the life that you live.
Yeah.
And that life has, through both of you, that faithfulness and that life has really molded and shaped my life. And I can look back, and even with my parents, and the impact that, I had a great family, but they were broken. You know what I mean? They had stuff going on in their lives, and we weren't the ideal. If I look back on it, we probably weren't the ideal family. You know what I mean, to represent God. But there was dysfunction in my family, just arguments and fighting and stuff like that. But they never were. They were always treated, just like everybody else, and that intention to be there and to be to minister to my family has made a huge impact on my life. So now then, whenever moving forward, as people are accepting Christ, and as as the ministry continues to move forward, it literally would not have the impact that it's having right now if it wasn't for you guys. And so from the deepest part of my heart, I got to tell you, I'm so grateful that you guys had an impact on my life the way that you did, and the way that you continue to do. And it's an honor. I talk about it all the time, that as a kid, growing up and going through school or going through church and seeing you guys, now then I get to be the pastor of a church that you guys attend. And
you get to tell us what to do now. We're just glad you're in a better place spiritually to tell us than you were back.
We remember what you preach.
Yeah, for now. Yeah.
You're making a great impact, though, on people.
No, I was going to say one thing, if it's all right.
Yeah.
You talk. All of us come from broken families.
Yeah.
All of us been broken to some degree or another. But some of the greatest times I have right now, though, is getting together with your family.
Yeah.
Those times out the lake when your mom and dad and your brothers is all out there, and your sister Stephanie and all of y'all's kids, and just such an example of a godly Christian family now. To see the work that God has done.
Yep.
And then Donna will leave them and think, man, that's a great family. We enjoy, just being around y'all, because it's such a good atmosphere, and just enjoying, our relationship with the Lord, our relationship with your family. And so your whole family, though, your mother and dad and your brothers, your sister and all the kids, y'all's a blessing and an inspiration to us as to the mighty work of God.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and for me, I say I come from a broken family. I love my family growing up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were. I've had great examples of how to love people.
Yeah.
Even in their brokenness. They truly loved people. Everybody that come in, they love. Matter of fact, Buddy Mosley, I laugh about it all the time, because my dad hugged him or something, and told him he loved him first time he come to church, and he said, "That guy tries to kiss me." But that was truly who my parents were. And they just love people. But that you guys you being their pastor for so many years, it just, and being able to, I think that's the importance of getting to know your pastor on a personal level. You realize that they're human, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
But whenever you get to see your pastor be who he is out in the public, the same thing that he preaches from the pulpit, or try to at least model that message in real life, man, that has more impact than you could ever imagine.
Well, I think a mistake has been made in the church in a lot of places, where pastors just kind of stayed separated and set off from the people.
Yeah.
And I went to as a pastor's training deal one time. It was Assembly God pastors all there, and they split us up in groups. I don't know, it was 6, 8, 10 in a group. and this is kind of the thing they was promoting in that group was, well, you don't want to develop close relationships or friendships with your people because it can cause, problems and things. And finally, I got to thought, and I said, look, best friends I got in this world's right there in that church. I said, I'd rather be around them than anybody and spend time with them because we're a family. I mean, you don't separate yourself from family. But they're thinking some of them back then this has been, 25 years ago or more, long, probably 30. I was in the Cone Park when all that, went to that seminar they was holding for
Well, that
us.
was the concept back then.
Yeah, but that was, you got to get your close friends have got to be outside of your church, and man, there ain't no way you're gonna pastor Johnny Fowler, your dad, and not be a good friend.
No, you're gonna get you a pie or something.
But even though I'm not there, still some of the greatest friends I got in this world is people that was part of that church.
Yeah. Well, and the work y'all did is still bearing fruit.
Well, we thank God for that.
Bearing fruit today.
We're glad we could be that example. Sometimes we feel like we weren't the best example, but nonetheless.
We're always an example. I don't know if it's a good one or not.
I still will, Robert.
Thousands of people that you guys have touched over the course of your ministries that are extremely grateful. Like I say, the videos that we've done in here, it never fails. Both of you come up in conversation, and so no matter the plan the enemy had on your life when you was younger, God had a greater plan. It's encouraging to me and to see and hear people talk about the impact that you guys have had on them. I pray that one day I'll be in that spot where people will say, Pastor John and Jessica come along and they helped us through a hard time and they seen us, through these moments in life and no matter the failures that we have as humans, we get to look at the power that God has worked through us and the fruit that's bore. And so I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for you guys accepting the call to be a pastor. God's call on our life is real, and I pray that if God's calling you, that you answer that call. And so, listen, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity to speak.
Hopefully we've said something that'll be helpful to someone anyway.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you'll edit it real well, make us look good. And what we said.
Oh no, this was great. So you guys look in that camera right there.
Yeah.
I love you guys. You guys take with you the ability to impact lives everywhere you go.
Amen.
We're done.